So welcome everyone to the November 9th Home for the Holidays class, delivered and brought to you by Learn, Lifelong Education and Aging Resource Network, and sponsored today by Oasis Senior Advisors and Red Pheasant Realty. Just a reminder that Learn, the Lifelong Education and Aging Resource Network, is an Idaho-based nonprofit with a mission to provide quality community education on retirement and aging related topics brought to you by local experts that can continue to be resources to you and your family. Learn is a leaders network of the Society of Certified Senior Advisors, which brings hopefully some comfort that the people coming to you are educated and knowledgeable in their field of study. That being said, this disclaimer that we do share is that this content we are providing is for general informational purposes only and should not be considered individual legal, financial, or health advice. We do ask that you consult with your legal, financial, healthcare, or other service provider before taking action based on any of this information. So my name is Dara Ray, and I am the president of Learn, and I'm pleased to host today's event and want to say thank you to our community sponsors, Oasis Senior Advisors and Red Pheasant Realty, who make it possible for us to bring this education to the community free of charge. Oasis and Red Pheasant have sponsored our entire fall series, and we're delighted to be able to thank them in every way we can for their support. And it is my pleasure to announce our presenter today, Dee Childers, the founder and owner of Life Changes Elder Consulting. And Dee will tell you a little bit about yourself, but I'm going to give her a brief introduction. Dee entered caregiving and care management following experiences managing her own parents and realized that it was a lot harder than it needed to be, and a level of expertise was needed. And so she came into this field with personal experience and a desire to make it easier for others to navigate this very challenging space, and provides guidance, coaching, support, consulting, hands-on, a little bit of everything to her clients and their families, and is very casually known as the hired daughter. So she steps in and helps her families navigate the very challenging terrain of care. So with that, Dee, I'm going to hand it over to you and let you add anything you would like to your introduction.
Well, thank you very much, Dara. I thought that was a great introduction. I have been in business for 9 years with Life Changes, and really it came about from exactly the thing that we're going to talk about today, is recognizing that things can change pretty quickly, and sometimes going home or to the parents' home can make a huge difference with what we know and what's going on. And so we're going to talk about Home for the Holidays, and let's just see if I can figure out how to share my own screen now. Here we go.
Yes, we see it.
Excellent. That's good. And then if I can just get this little guy moved over so I can manage my own controls, I can start the slideshow. So this is Home for the Holidays. As we know, many of us are preparing to go home and maybe for the first time in a very long time, to be able to see our parents and other loved ones that we haven't seen for a while. And while I'm talking about, I use the word parents in this presentation, it could be any family member that you have some responsibility or commitment to making sure that they're doing well. So it doesn't have to be just parents. It could be step parents, could be aunts and uncles, etc. And so what I want to kind of emphasize today is this is being prepared to assess. I think one of the most important things is to be prepared to assess and not necessarily take action. So most of us we're home, we want to get things done. And my suggestion to you is just go with open eyes and open heart and assess at this point in time for the most part. So as I mentioned, COVID has impacted all of us in our ability to see our loved ones in person. We might have spoken to them on the phone or even used some technology to see them. And maybe over the course of time, we picked up some clues that might have been concerning us, but we're not for sure. And so I want to encourage you to be prepared to prepare yourself to witness changes that are potentially more dramatic or show a need than you expected. And so I really want to encourage you to not overreact, to agree to act together. For us, when this whole thing happened, we had seen our father 5 or 6 times during the course of the year, but we'd never been to his home in a year and a half. And so when that call came for us and we needed to rush to Dad's house, we were dramatically stunned about the changes that had happened. And they were manifested in his house, where we didn't really pick up on all those things by just having conversations with him or seeing him other places. So in terms of going home, I want you to plan your visit for your aging parent or other loved ones who are aging. So I want you to think about a strategy up front. And so in doing this, if you're going home with other family members, maybe siblings or aunts and uncles, you might want to have a conversation in advance of your visit and just discuss the needs to pay attention, to assess how well things are going, and to kind of talk about and include any concerns that you might have had from previous conversations. This is not the time for a lot of action taking, and we'll talk about that in a second. So agree on a strategy that you're not going to make spontaneous comments about concerns like, Mom, how'd your house get to be such a mess? Or, gosh, your clothes are dirty and torn, or you've lost a lot of weight. I want you to just be mindful and present about what's going on. I encourage you to take notes about specifics, dates and times when things happened, what the situation were or are, who else might have been involved when those things happened. And really, you're going to be assessing for risks and likelihood. So there may be some high priorities, and those may be the things that you need to take action on more immediately. But many of these things don't have to be addressed. They're not crisis yet, but they do need to be attended to. So I want you to keep that in mind, that you're assessing what are the risks if we don't do anything right now versus the benefits. Make a plan to review your experiences with your siblings or whoever else might be in your family system that would be involved in identifying what issues were and potential solutions, and then potential pair of hands to help make things go the way they need to be for correction. So when you plan this, you're going to get everybody's input, but during a separate conversation. It's not a conversation that you're going to have in front of Mom and Dad, because you need to do a lot of brainstorming here, and you might need to do some venting, because we get frustrated when we see these changes, and we can express our emotion about these changes in ways that are not helpful and potentially hurtful to our parents and aging loved ones there. So we don't want that to be our first interaction as we're trying to plan for the future, resolve some problems or potential problems. We want to be calm, cool, collected, and have a bit of a strategy as we move forward there. So some of those strategies may require immediate attention. And as I mentioned, if it's concerning their physical safety and well-being, you may have to take action. Somebody's calling Donald Duck, or Donald Duck is calling. So if it has to do with safety or security, that there are maybe some imminent threat, either for potential physical abuse or financial abuse, exploitation. So and then a medical urgency. So those actions may require immediate attention and you need to do something at that point in time. But there's many other actions that may require additional information and additional strategies as how you're going to move into helping support your loved ones. And that could include things like the need to see a doctor. Maybe they haven't been to the doctor in a while, home modifications, solutions for systems. You know, some of the systems for safety could be a first alert that is added to the cadre of tools in your toolbox to help your parents. There's other things that might be technology related, like maybe it is an echo show. If they're not using technology, maybe it would be helpful if you were able to see them a little more often and physically get a sense or read of what's going on. And you may just need to do some research. You know, you're going to be looking at the web, you're going to be looking at books by professionals that have written about family caregiving. Other care professionals could be the doctors that are involved with the care, other resources that are in their community or your community. At this point in time, you're still really just trying to figure out what the path forward is going to be. So I want you to think about this strategically and only address things that have some urgency, some imminent danger or imminent outcome if things are not taken care of right away. So it's also important to remember, stay calm and don't overreact. As soon as you express, Mom, what are you thinking? You know, the dishes are piled up. Well, when was the last time you did dishes? You're going to put them on an immediate sense of defense, and they're going to feel judged. And one of the things that we all fear as we're aging is we fear the potential of losing control of our lives, of becoming more dependent on other people than we're used to or want to, and potentially even feeling like a burden. I mean, that is one of the things that our seniors say a lot is, I don't want to be a burden to my children. And so we want to make sure that that's not something that we induce by our reaction. So again, stay calm. And I can't stress this enough. Our parents are not our children. And so we don't want to treat them as such. We may have to do a lot more caregiving and care providing for them than we did in the past, but that does not make them our children. They're adults who have seasoned lives and many life experiences, and we always want to remember to treat them with respect and kindness for their experiences. So, as I said, be prepared to calm yourself if you see things that concern you. You know, be sure maybe you have someone that you can call later in the evening and you can vent and express your concerns to, away from the parents. Take a break, walk away if a conversation becomes heated. You know, my mom and I were very much alike. And we could butt heads pretty easily. And I know, a lot of the reason I can state this so overtly is because I made many of these mistakes, and I just want to encourage you to not make some of the same mistakes that I did or that many other folks have. So it's okay to just take a break and walk away if a conversation or a situation becomes heated. Not in disgust, not in frustration, maybe in frustration, but with just an acknowledgement, you know what, I need to just take a little break from our conversation right now. Perhaps you do too. Let's just, take some deep breaths, maybe go for a walk together, do something different. Just don't continue down a road that's not going to end with positivity and potential good outcomes. One of the times it's even more difficult to manage all of this is when there's cognitive decline in your loved one. And it can be a little disorienting to you as well. It's like, what am I seeing here? How is this happening? This is not the mom I've known. Dad's always been so sharp. And a couple of just tips in here relative to that is, don't get angry if they can't remember what you just told them. They're not doing this to irritate you. They literally can't remember. And so it doesn't help the situation if you get mad at them. It just makes them more frustrated and less able to think clearly at whatever level they're able to. And it's really important not to say, don't you remember? Another thing that's very common for us adult children to do. Don't you remember? I just told you this. In fact, I just told you this 10 times. It does not help. And it's just better to just give the same answer over again or move on to another topic. Some of the things to look for, and Dara, if there's comments along the way, feel free to interrupt me and we can
Sure.
stop and talk. So remember,
so that's an invitation for anyone who has a question or a comment. You can put it in chat if you don't want to open up. I will say it for you, or I might just have comments.
You just might, Dara. I've known you to do that. So remember to observe non-judgmentally and silently. Again, this is going to be one of the hardest things for you to do. I understand that. I know that. I certainly did a bad job of it with both my mom and dad. And so please, I hope you can learn something from what I didn't do well, because I know it didn't create good relationships sometimes. So some of the things that you're looking for, especially if you haven't been there in a while, is the house in disarray when it hasn't been before? You know, when I walked into my dad's house that first time after a year and a half of being there were magazines that were piled feet deep all the way around his living room, his family room. So it was really neatly organized, but I was blown away by the number of magazines that he had, as well as the piles of mail that he had. He literally had 76 magazine subscriptions. 16 of them he had more than one subscription of. And I do get very irritated with magazines and those health newsletters because they are very confusing. And if you lose a little bit of cognitive capacity, and you like these things, you might just write another check. And that's what he was doing. He was just writing checks to anybody that sent him the bill. And so more magazines would come and he'd pay for them. Discreetly, if you can, take photos of the areas of concern just to give some recollection of how things were and to be able to share the information with your siblings, because sometimes they just can't believe it. If they haven't been there and seen it, they don't believe it. And you may need to provide some information to a doctor or a legal professional down the line that just kind of helps demonstrate what's been going on, that you're talking about, why you need to move some legal action, like having them declared lack of capacity. So photos can be very helpful discreetly. Just as I said, notice any patterns. Mail is piling up, dirty dishes, dirty clothes. The home is in disrepair. So there may be simple things that you can take care of while you're there. If they're simple, truly simple, maybe they just need a little help taking care of the house. Maybe, you know, asking mom if a housekeeper would be helpful, or does a handyman need to come over and make some repairs? Is there mail piling up? And they might need a little help sorting through the mail. What's the junk mail? I know I just went to our mailbox. We're not really good at going to it often. So we have a locking mailbox so we don't have to worry about it. But I came out of the mailbox with a pile of mail that was just 4 days worth. That was about 8 inches tall, and tons of it was junk and just other stuff. And so sometimes people just need help sorting what's important and not important, or maybe they do need a little more help, maybe somebody to help them with paying bills. But as I said, mostly you're observing right now, but there may be a few little suggestions that you could make along the line. So one of the other things that you want to be looking at is what's going on in the refrigerator and pantry. Is full food old or moldy? Is it all processed food, like canned or frozen meals? So our dad really liked Costco burritos. And so he would buy big bags of burritos. And that was mostly what was in his freezer. And lots of other kind of frozen prepackaged food that, from my perspective, are not so healthy. I know other people really like those, but in my world, I think fresh prepared food, fresh vegetables and fruits are far more important. And so when we would go, we would just make sure that we cooked a lot for him and froze those meals for him. So that was some of the stuff that we could do real time without, irritating him or making him feel badly, because he liked our cooking and he was sure going to have my lasagna versus that frozen burrito. But maybe they need somebody help with planning meals, shopping, and preparing food. So these are a few things that are kind of low-hanging fruit that you might be able to get some movement on while you're there. And if it doesn't feel right, don't force it. That's one of those things that you can wait for and come back with another time. So again, we're observing, not judgmentally and silently. You've noticed that mom or dad have lost or gained a lot of weight. And typically that's kind of looked at as 10 pounds in the last 12 months. So you want to observe what kinds of things are they eating and drinking? Are they drinking a lot of soda pop and not eating? Again, are they eating all this processed food that we know has a lot of additives, a lot of salt, a lot of sugar, other things that are not helpful to them? Watch how often and when do they eat, because they may be just eating once a day. They've decided that's all that's necessary. I know that's one of the things that our dad did. Well, I really don't need to eat 3 meals a day. I'll just eat dinner. And meanwhile, he was gaining a lot of weight because he was snacking through the day and he was eating bigger meals in the evening. Want to pay attention to if they're drinking enough fluids. It's odd that as we age, our desire, our thirst declines. So while people may have been wonderful water drinkers their whole life, as our parents were, they always carried a bottle of water with them everywhere they went. They both had trouble with that as they aged, that they were not drinking fluids regularly. And actually, the only 2 hospitalizations my dad ever had were dehydration. And so then it became a process of figuring out how to make him more motivated to drink things. And that meant really finding things that he felt were tasty and not bad for him. You want to even ask, but certainly observe. Have they had any falls? Ask, have you had any falls? If so, how often? Where were they when it happened? When did it happen? And some of your clues that might give you an indication that this is an area of concern is that they have unexplained bruises or skin tears. They might be complaining of pain, their knees or their hips hurt or their back. It could also mean that's an issue that needs to be addressed with a physician, but it could be an indication of a fall. They appear unsteady on hare feet. They have a lack of balance. So you want to be paying attention to those kinds of things. We want to watch, how are they taking their medications? How are they managing those? Do they have a medication list? Or do they just have bottles lined up? Do they use pill boxes to help them manage what they're taking and when they're taking them? Or is it kind of a hodgepodge? And certainly I've seen it all over the place, including where the medications are. So that's one of the other things that you might want to do casually and non-judgmentally, is observe, are there a lot of medications all over the house, that they're not in one place? Some things are in the bathroom, some things are next to the beds, others are in the kitchen. And pay attention to expired medications or ones that just look really aged, and that includes over-the-counter medications too. And just paying attention to what that is. And then maybe asking permission if you could kind of go through and help them dispose of those that are old and expired. I think asking permission is a really important approach here, that's mindful and it's respectful, and something as simple as, Mom, would you mind if I just kind of went through and gathered up all those meds that were expired, and then we can drop them off at the local pharmacy or at the police department? And it's you do it in a non-threatening, non-judgmental way, and it's like, oh yeah, I've been meaning to get to that. They'll be more receptive, and this can be one of those higher risk areas. If there's medication that's expired or they're not taking anymore, if something's taken that shouldn't be. So that's probably one of those things that I might do a little work on during that first visit. You want to pay attention, are there any controlled substances like pain medication? If they're taking pain medication, what are they taking it for? And how often are they taking it? And we're going to talk about that some more in just a little bit. But paying attention to medications is one of those pretty important areas. The other thing is observing the people that are in their world, because it can go two ways with people. There's new people in their life because maybe they don't have many other people there. You're living far away or not able to see them often. So there's new people that come into their life. Sometimes it's a neighbor, sometimes it's somebody from church. And I don't like to always come at these relationships with suspicion, but having worked in the field of elder care and knowing how many people are abused and exploited in the world, both by family caregivers as well as others who we'd like to think wouldn't be doing that, I do encourage you to just have an element of alertness about other people in their lives.
I hate to admit, this is one where it's really hard. You want to trust, then you don't want to trust. And this is one that I found with my own father and with some of my clients really difficult to judge, because sometimes it's hard to find motivation.
Exactly. And there are really good do-gooders in the world. I happen to be one of them. I stick my nose in people's business all the time. But it's just important to be observant and to make connections with those people so that you have a better sense when they know that you're involved and that you care and you're paying attention. It just changes the dynamic of the relationship a little bit. And, perhaps your folks will be just a little more protected. The other side of that is, are there few or no outside people in their social world there, and they're experiencing social isolation, and that's another concern. We know that the way to healthy aging is all of the usuals. We eat well, we exercise well, we sleep well, and we have social connection in our life. And that's been one of the very damaging things that's come about through COVID with this whole thing. We know that the isolation that not only our senior loved ones have experienced, whether they be living in an assisted living community or independent living community or in their own home, we've all shut down over the last almost 2 years now, and that's impacted all of us. And social isolation is a serious issue. And what kind of things could we help them get involved with that they've done in the past or they might be interested in? So again, paying attention. Are they getting external stimulation with other people in their life or not? Some of the other things that you want to be paying attention to are, how does the car look?
Mm-hmm.
Are there dents and scratches in the car that are kind of unusual? Is it bunged up? Maybe they told you they've had a few accidents. Driving is one of those very significant areas that kind of show up, and it's one of the most difficult areas to address, because we in this country identify driving with independence. And if we can't drive, we feel like we lose our independence. There's many solutions to this problem, but the first thing is it feels like a threat. You're taking away my independence, but it's also very dangerous. And so we want to know that our loved ones are still capable of being good drivers and being safe drivers. So, if it's appropriate, ride with your parent to the store. Don't always insist upon driving. Good to see how they do. Do they get lost? Do they, put on their turn signals? Do they change lanes without looking? Drive over curbs. That's one I hope nobody assesses me on, because I do have some depth perception issues and drive over curbs turning to my right a lot. But shy of that, I'm a pretty good driver. So
Details.
details. So you want to be observant with how well they drive. Similarly, even going for a walk, getting out, going for a walk with them. How's their balance? Pay attention. Do they wobble? Do they feel unsteady on their feet? Do they get lost when you go maybe outside their immediate area? Are they comfortable moving outside the immediate area? Do you see any neighbors that know and speak with them? Because that's another thing that can be real helpful, is to know. So those other people that in their lives are both your friends as well as can be your concerns, but are other people concerned about them, and maybe check in on them and speak with them so that there is some connection there. So, you know, how people get around is really important, and just know there are solutions. We know in different communities there's kind of go granny, I think it is. So there's companies that are specifically set up to work with, it's like senior Uber. Taxis can be great. Neighbors or friends that might, you know, agree to take them to the grocery store. Again, I'm moving a little bit into solutions, but it's just because this is such a big area right here. So it's, you want to be planful in this area and not just throw it out there. Dad's not safe to drive anymore. We can't, Mom, we can't let him drive. And Dad's sitting right next to her, and you're going to have a big fight, and it's not going to go well. And so I would encourage you to not do that kind of thing. There's some strategy along with that. You can ask for driving assessments through the primary care physician if that's a concern. And the doctor is your ally in this case. Hopefully not all doctors will stand up and say, no, it's not okay to drive, but many will, especially if they're used to working with seniors. So they can be your partner in this one. What's happening here? So kind of back at the house, a couple of other things as we look at those again. Do you notice a lot of unpaid bills that are laying around, and hard to tell what's been paid and what isn't? Have utilities been shut off? You know, some of these, actually we hit just about every one of these that first visit up after we got a call from our dad's long-term care insurance policy that said he hadn't paid his bill, and I couldn't get Dad to figure out how to pay it online. And that was really a big clue for us, because he'd been very computer literate and now he couldn't. But there was a lot of bills and invoices all over the place, and many of them had paid on them, and that's because he was paying them multiple times, and he sent everybody that asked for money. But he did have his DirecTV turned off, because when the day we arrived there. Now, he actually figured it out and got it turned back on, but we were made aware that his DirecTV had been shut off. And so again, if not ability to manage and pay bills in the way that he would have normally in the past. Hygiene is another key area. Are their clothes dirty and disrepair? We have one client, but he's not doing this anymore, who I swear to God had worn one pair of jeans for at least a month, maybe 2 or 3. They would literally stand up when he took them off. They were that dirty that the dirt was just so embedded in them. And he was a working man, and he didn't see anything wrong with wearing dirty pants, but they were literally hazardous at that point in time. So noting, are they dirty and disrepair? One report I got for our mother when we were going through a similar process, both of our parents ended up having dementia, 2 different types of dementia, but I got a write-up from a social worker who made a mistake and sent me somebody else's report. And it said my mother was in disrepair, her clothes were dirty, and they were unbuttoned and something else. And I knew immediately that this was not my mother's report, because my mother would never be that way. But on the other hand, other situations can be like that. Are they taking showers and bathing regularly? It's weird, as we get older, one, we probably do need to take less showers and baths because we're not perspiring or doing as much work as we needed to. So As we get older, typically we bathe less than we used to, but there's a difference between bathing less and smelling bad and having dirty hair. And, toenails are another area to pay attention to. And that's very deep and personal, but lack of care of our feet can be a serious condition that can impact us medically as well. So paying attention to how long their toenails are and if their feet are kept, and if not, that's one of the things that needs to be added to your list of for discussion and problem solving.
It's hard not to jump in with solutions, Dee.
It's very hard, and that's why you'll see at the top of every slide here, observation, judgmentally and silently. You will be so much more successful in your strategy if it's not reactive, if it's planful, and it will feel more respectful. And that's why I keep emphasizing that. It doesn't mean you're not observing and taking notes, but we're going to be more we're going to take more time to figure out a path forward. So, and then, then the other one, and there's a zillion of them, but I'm hitting on the highlights here. And the other one is, do you think there may be some cognitive decline? Are you noticing that they're much more forgetful and not just, I can't remember the right word. There's, you're literally using the wrong word and thinking it's the right word. Or sometimes I don't want to remember how busy my week is, so I forget until I look at my calendar the next day. What do I have going on? But this is forgetful in an unusual kind of way. Forgetful, maybe your sister's name or what their pet's name is or something along that line. They're
consistently calling someone by the wrong name.
Right.
Mixing generations is another one you see a lot.
Exactly. My grandfather, I thought, always had a very good system for that. He called all women sis and all men bud. And so you never could tell if you could remember your name or not. You were sis or bud.
It works.
It worked. You never knew. And, as I mentioned earlier, they ask the same things over and over again. So you start to see, and there are some things that change cognitively as we age, but they don't have to. And there's certainly distinctions between just kind of maybe a normal aging forgetfulness or less concerns about something versus a dementia, a potential dementia that could be included in there. So this is stuff that goes into your notebook that you're paying attention to. What happened? Where was it? Who was involved? And the circumstances, because some things are contributed. There's other things that contribute to those happening real time. If they're feeling judged and scrutinized, they are probably going to be a little more forgetful and maybe a little more irritable. So that's why we want to try and keep things as calm and as pleasant as possible and have a nice time, knowing that we still have to put a plan of action together. So other thoughts about this section right here? Any other experiences anybody's had that they'd like to share?
How do you, Dee, what are your thoughts on it's hard enough to be non-judgmental and silent on your own. Do you have suggestions for redirecting a conversation if a family member starts making those comments? How can you, very often you're not the only family member present. And so if you see somebody else doing that, should you address it and like have a private conversation, or what would you recommend?
Well, that's an excellent point, Dara. That's why one of the first things that I had said is like, let's have a plan going into this. And that we agree that we're going to have conversations privately. We're going to observe and make note, but it'll happen. Stuff just comes out of our mouth. Mom, what are you thinking?
Well, or somebody that you didn't think of planning with in advance will do it.
That too. And so sometimes it's just a gentle redirection. Oh yeah, I do that too. Mom, we'll figure out if that's something that we can help you with, solve the problem. But basically you want to see if you can interrupt that flow a little bit, kindly and gently, and kind of move the conversation a little bit of a different direction. Let's talk about that at, another time. So to kind of diffuse the situation and redirect it to something that's more neutral. What about you, Dara? Do you have some suggestions there?
Just to get in front of it and redirect it, and if necessary, if it's causing anxiety, particularly with the parent, even being a little assertive and asking somebody to take a walk with you, or you may not be able to necessarily be gentle, but you don't want it to derail what you're trying to accomplish. And most people they're confused themselves. They're wanting to help. And so if you can let them know you're aware and you are assessing and enlist their help, they will usually come right along with you. They are expressing their fears usually. And so they just need to know that someone is aware and is assessing, and you would appreciate their help. And usually that will redirect them.
Absolutely. There's nothing to say that you can't need some help getting everybody a drink.
Yep.
Exactly.
Can I show you my collection of?
Really. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think the other thing that you touched on a little bit, and I'm not sure where you are in your presentation or if you're going to go back to it, is that balance between the parent-child relationship and understanding that as long as someone is safe and has the ability to make decisions, whether we like it or not, they have the right to make bad ones.
Yeah.
And this one is really hard, especially in this early time. Was it just a bad decision that they have the right to make, or is it a signal of something bigger than that? Any advice on how to sort through that dynamic of parent-child relationship?
Yeah, that's a biggie. It's a real big one. And that a lot of adult children think that if a parent makes a bad choice or a choice that they wouldn't make, that must mean that they don't have any capacity or the ability to make good decisions. And the bottom line is, as long as we know what we're making, why we're making it, and what the potential outcome of it is, essentially, we get the right to continue to make bad decisions. Some people make bad decisions their whole life and still get through. Yeah. And that there's a very distinct line between making choices or decisions that we wouldn't make that we consider bad, and the inability to make decisions with the understanding of the outcome of it, the potential side effects that might come from it, the implications, all of those kinds of things. That capacity or incapacity, competency, both of those words get used, is a very specific process. And so we remind people regularly, your parent still has capacity to make decisions, even if you don't like them, even if they're not good decisions. So,
or if you don't agree with them. And I think that's when I work with families, I try to remind them I ask them to think about their reaction. Is their reaction because it's not a decision they would make? Is it because they don't agree with the decision, or is it because they're worried their parent isn't able to make a good decision? And if it's one of the first two, I remind them,
Yep,
they are adults with the ability to make whatever decisions they want, but it's very hard.
So again, keeping in mind, they're adults, they're not children. We teach children about mistakes and about doing things to help them make better decisions. these are adults and they do make bad decisions sometimes.
Well, and I think the other side of that is sometimes they make the decision because they don't have enough information. It doesn't mean they're not capable of making a good decision. You just need to help them understand and give them access to the rest of the information they didn't need to. So there is a middle ground too around how do you engage electronically to pay bills now, right? And maybe they didn't know how to do that and they can learn that and then they're fine. Maybe they can't learn it, right? So kind of assessing what is your reaction, what is their ability to learn something they may not know how to do or are afraid to learn something new, right? Helping that along and enabling that.
Great, great. I'm helping coordinate a Zoom meeting between some sisters, East Coast, West Coast, and in Idaho. And, you know, the sisters know how to do some things electronically in varying degrees, but they're willing to try. And I appreciate that immensely. And I'll help them through as much as I can versus a couple of them, which just like, nope, don't know how to do it, don't want to do it. I need to help them find somebody who is technology competent to be able to help them have this three-way conversation with their sister here in Idaho. So
Yeah.
you do have to assess. So excellent point. All right. So we're going to talk just a little bit in this same visit. You may want to be planning for the future a little bit, and at the same visit, I mean, there's way more to do, and that can be done than we're going to cover in this presentation. But remember, this is just planning for your next visit home when you haven't been there in a while, and observing things. So a couple of really key things that just show up over and over and over again that not everybody has planned for and makes a world of difference in your ability to help or the ability of others to help. And that's a couple of essential documents here that we're going to talk about. And that is, I guess I decided to talk about conversations to review observations first. Okay, that was kind of funny. So we'll talk about those documents in just a minute. Either after you've left for the visit, or if you have an opportunity to get away with maybe your siblings or whoever else was there, to be able to share, to have a conversation, to review your observations, share what you saw that concerns you, giving specific examples so that others can really relate to it. And I can't stress that enough. In everything that we do, whether it be with children, with, somewhere along our life when we're trying to learn something new, is if somebody can give us a specific behavioral example of what it is, it has more meaning and we're better able to comprehend what's being said. So that being able to give examples of specific things that have happened, when, where, why, and how. And so that's sharing what you've experienced with them, and then start talking about potential strategies for having conversations with your parents about your concerns. It could be over the phone, maybe it's another visit, maybe it's a Zoom, but that you come up with a strategy for having those conversations, and not too much at one time. When you're having these initial conversations with the other members of your team, assuming you have other members of your team, what are potential solutions for each of the concerns? Because they could be real simple, like hiring a housekeeper or a lawn care maintenance company, a handyman, someone to come in and cook, pay bills. There's a lot of things that's fairly easy to get resources for, and some simpler solutions. And so you want to kind of have a little bit of a strategy prepared there. And again, as I said here, remember, your parents are mature, experienced adults who deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. And so that means including them in the conversation. Well, we noticed this. What do you think, Mom? What would be helpful to you? We noticed that, the dishes kind of pile up in the kitchen, would it be helpful to have somebody come in once or twice a week and kind of do housekeeping for you? So ask for their involvement, ask for their input, and anything else that they might observe or know. And there can be great relief into saying, sometimes it's just hard for us to ask for help. And so knowing that that's kind of been normalized and it's reasonable to ask for help as we get older. So we want them to be part of the solution as well and include them in those conversations. Any thoughts about that one?
Start with the safety concerns and you start with those first. And once you get those addressed, then you can get to some of those other ones. But your list might be overwhelming. And so really kind of prioritize around what is a safety concern now, could become a safety issue of some kind in the future. And don't try to fix them all at the same time.
Exactly. Excellent point. We in our family are spreadsheet experts, as is Dara. And we had spreadsheets that were long and wide. And my dad also loves spreadsheets, so he could get behind the strategy, but it's a little overwhelming. So Dara's suggestion there is really an important one: small bites. And you start with those three areas that we talked about: safety issues, security issues, and medical potential crisis issues. And that's, you take those first, and then you start working and you assess by priority, what's the urgency of those other issues. Because there are some issues that are really low hanging fruit and just don't need to be addressed right up front. Too much up front or at any time is overwhelming. And so that's a super important point: small bites.
And I think the other thing would be is, that being said, if you have very significant concerns about safety or security that you think really need to be addressed more aggressively, seek help. Right. And Dee, you may talk a little bit about where people can reach out if they find themselves feeling like a bit of a crisis situation. What do they do if they don't feel like they have the luxury of time to address some of those urgent needs, since it has been a long time since a lot of us have been home?
Yes, exactly. We're going to touch bases on that in just a little bit, but
Perfect.
Anything that I don't cover, I know you'll help me with. So one of the first, if we can get through just a couple of other things at this visit, if they haven't been done before, there's about 3 things I want to see if you're able to cover at this visit. And one is to make sure that you know about the medical side of things. And so who are their medical providers? And what are their names and their contact information? What's their specialty? And how often do they see them? And you really need to keep in mind the full hierarchy of, is this not only the primary care physician, but what about the dentist? What about the eye doctor? So right off, those are the top 3. Have they been, or do we need to see about moving them forward? Because, I have people who still haven't been out to a medical visit since COVID hit. That's been loosening up significantly. But there's some things you just can't do with telehealth. It's very hard to clean your teeth over that year or check your eyesight. So you kind of have to be in person for some of those things. But make sure that you get a list, and you want to leave a copy with them too. So they may have a list. Some people do, some people don't. So help them put it together, gather the information, and make sure that they have their copy of it so it's convenient. It was worth their effort to help you put it together. And in addition to that is the list about medications. So to sit down with them, again, very judgmentally, Mama, just help me in case there was emergency and I needed to help you or help Dad to know what medications you were on. So, there's lots of non-threatening ways that you can come about this. I just want to be prepared in the event that you need my help, right? And so you want to make sure that you have a list of medications, the names of the medications, the dosage. So not only is it a 20 milligram pill, but do they take 0.5? Do they take half that pill, or do they take 2 of those pills? So how often do they take it? And what time of day do they take it? Who prescribed it and for what purpose? And Dara, I can add my medication template. I'll send that to you that you could add out there,
Okay.
the handout. So
And you'll send these slides too, so people will have these,
yes.
and I can make them notes pages even.
Yep, I can do that for you for sure.
Perfect.
So those things, if you can get that little bit of medical information down, you'll be a very big way along the line of being able to step in the event of emergency. You know, there's other things like what their medical history is, and there's a lot of things that are going to come out of this meeting, and we're not going to go into all of that. But once you have a list of what needs to be done, then you can start working on how to get it. And this is a high priority one from my perspective. And the other one that's along that line is the a couple of legal documents. And we're going to talk about these 2 key legal documents. One is the advanced directives for healthcare, and the other one is the power of attorney for finances. And to just ask the folks, you know, do you have these documents? And I want to make sure you understand what they are. So an advanced directive is composed of 2 separate documents. And one is the living will, and it provides specific instructions for the end of life care preferences. I mean, it's really, you're a terminal state, you're in a vegetative state, you're not expected to live much longer at all. And that's the only time those instructions are really applied. Everything else is based on their input, if they have the capacity to make it, or input from the healthcare agent or their power of attorney. And that's the second document in the advanced directives, is a durable power of attorney, and they become the individual's agent. So that's the person who they would like to act for them and make decisions for them if they're not able to. And with the healthcare power of attorney, that's the only time it is in effect, is if they can't make their own decisions. Up to that point, they're in charge of their healthcare. Doesn't matter who has a copy of that document. If they have the capacity to make their decisions, and the doctor determines that, meaning they understand what the issue is, what the potential consequences are, and what the results are or the risk if they do it or they don't do it, they're allowed to make their own decisions. In the event that they're not able to, they could be unconscious, they could be in surgery and under anesthesia, or there could be a permanent or temporary cognitive issue. Then they step in for the period of time they're incapacitated. So they come out of surgery, they can make their own decisions again. So you want to make sure that you understand who is the primary power of attorney. And with parents, usually it's the spouse. Sometimes it's not, but it could be one of the adult children. So we're looking at who's the primary decision maker. If they're not available, who's the first alternate. And it's helpful, really, really helpful to make sure there's more than just one person listed on there, because things happen and people are out of the country, people are no longer available, they're not connected. Lots of things can happen. So you want at least one alternate, and preferably a second alternate, so that decision making, there are people in succession who can make decisions in the event the individual isn't able to make them themselves. In the state of Idaho, there is code, Idaho state code, that says if this document isn't there, who are the people that the doctors will go to? And there's a specific list of them. But if they have the power of attorney, they decide who makes those decisions for them. And then you want to make sure that you have copies of these documents, that their agents have copies of the documents, that the local hospitals have them, and the primary care physician or the PCP has those documents. The second document that is really important is the general power of attorney or durable power of attorney for finances. And this is a very powerful document. And the agents or the people designated to serve in this capacity must be trustworthy and responsible, because most powers of attorney documents are written that they're effective immediately. So as soon as that person gets that document in their hand, they can do whatever they want with that power of attorney document. And unfortunately, I know of several cases where houses have been signed over to other people and people have lost their homes. That assets have been spent in ways that they shouldn't have. So it's a powerful document. Some of them are written in a way that they're not just automatically able to do them as soon as they have the document in their hand. And those are called springing power of attorney, where you have to have a doctor designate that they're not able to make their own decisions at this point in time.
And determining which one is right for your situation is really need to look at the situation. And if there's concern, it's quite handy to not have it be springing if you need to step in and help. But there's risk with that, which is if you don't have it springing, like Dee said, any decision can be made at any time. It's not like the healthcare power of attorney where it's only if that person can't make decisions on their own, unless it has the springing clause. Some people, the springing clause, some people don't like, because it means that if they need to be able to make that decision, there will be a delay while they figure out how to document that. So you really need to think about how much risk is there for abuse or exploitation in any case. And if there is any concern around risk or exploitation, that springing clause should be considered.
Right. I just feel really strongly that the financial power of attorney or general power of attorney is best done with an attorney. I know
Agreed.
You can get them on Zoom, yes, all of that, but an attorney will really do their due diligence to help make sure that the right people are chosen to serve as the agent. It's not necessarily the firstborn or the first male or the first female. It really has a lot more to do with character and integrity.
And that's why you want an attorney to help you, not to help you fill out the form, right? But to make sure you're, as you stated, Dee, to really make sure that you're making a good decision given your unique circumstances.
Exactly. Can't stress that enough. And these documents are necessary. I mean, where there's state statute in Idaho that says who is the power of attorney for healthcare, that's great, but there's no such statute for power of attorney for finances or general power of attorney. And if there is no agent appointed when that person needs it, the only recourse is to go to court and have a judge evaluate and make decisions. So one couple that we worked with quite a few years back now, there was a fairly traditional relationship, and the man took care of all of the money and everything was in his name alone. So including the cable bill, and he didn't have a power of attorney. She could not make changes to her own cable plan because she wasn't the power of attorney and she wasn't on the account. And the only thing that could be done, now the story had a happy ending because of some other things, but she was looking at having to go to court and get conservatorship over her husband because she had no way of making other changes because her name wasn't on things and this document wasn't available. So these are important. Again, with this particular document, you may or may not want to give copies to the agent at the time because it is so powerful, but at least if they know where they're at and they have availability to get to them should they need them is kind of the key piece there. And you might thought you were going to get 3 old people here, but I thought, no. We may all feel like we're kids, but we're not. Planning is important. and getting professional help when needed is important. And so professional help can come in the name of, you know, the doctors or the medical care providers that we use, care managers, people like what I do, people that consultants like Dara, you know, other folks. She kind of does the more financial piece. I do the more the healthcare piece. You know, there's folks like that that are out there. Financial advisors are another key member of the team. So there's lots of people that are available to help. So ask for help when you don't know what to do. You're not alone. We've all gone through this or are going through this. And there's actually not only no shame for asking for help, I commend you for asking for help.
So Dee, there's a comment. I'd like to read it to you and then see if maybe you have a suggestion.
Okay.
Thank you so much for these presentations. We lost my father in '89 with Alzheimer's and our mother in 2018. I wish I knew all this then. It was very hard to learn the hard way. Now we lost my aunt's husband last month, and my aunt is not doing well. Her son is trying to take care of her, but her daughter is stealing her blind. I want to help, but can't seem to. So I put a note that maybe they could try to get a care manager to do a needs assessment, but where might they go to if they're worried about exploitation?
So a couple of places. One, probably the number one is Adult Protective Services. So every community is connected to the Area Agency on Aging. Every community across the United States, there is an Area Agency on Aging. And within the Area Agency on Aging is Adult Protective Services. So you could just Google Adult Protective Services Boise and you will get the number. And that is an excellent place to report what you're experiencing and what your sense of what is going on there. And every state has different laws, and sometimes it can be frustrating. Idaho has vulnerable adult laws. And so in Idaho, you can steal somebody blind if they're not vulnerable, because basically they're allowing it. There's other ways to come around that. But you can report it to the Adult Protective Services. You can report it to the police. You can go into the bank or the financial institution and just speak to a bank manager, just let them know what you're experiencing. You know, financial institutions have far more responsibility and accountability for observing exploitation at this point in time than they used to. I was on my dad's checking account. I was literally on his account, and no one ever notified me that he was, one month he wrote 400 checks. 400 checks for $10 was still $4,000. Lots of things. Banks and financial advisors at this point in time have far more responsibility to report suspicious behavior. So you could report it even to that level, but certainly to Adult Protective Services would be probably the first place I would go.
And Charlie Hahn has added the contact information here in Boise for that. It's 208-898-7060 and ask for adult protection.
Excellent. Thank you, Charlie. What other questions? Comments?
I think the other thing as you head into this is steel yourself, but give yourself, allow yourself to feel and process it too, because this has the potential to be a lot. So while you can approach this as a pragmatic, you're doing an assessment, it's likely acknowledge this is might be hard and will very likely be emotional, right? And so honoring your own response to what you see and giving yourself time to process it as well, and not just being a problem solver. Encourage, it goes back to taking care of the caregiver. You need to make sure you're managing and caring for yourself if you're going to be of any help to someone who might need you.
Exactly. There are caregiver support groups all over the place. And trust me, as a caregiver, a very experienced caregiver, having support is critical and key, and being able to have a safe place to voice your frustrations and your irritations and your concerns, and oh my goodness, it is hard work. So make sure you build a support system around yourself, and do things to take care of yourself as either a current or a future caregiver. And just always remember, these are your parents, they're not your kids. We don't treat adults like children. So with that, I thank you very much. There's so much more we could cover, but I think this hits that going home for the holidays. And I hope you have wonderful holidays ahead of you.